Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see all of you. We'll wait just one more minute before we get started. How's everybody today?
Good, thank you.
Good. Hanging in there?
Tired.
Yes.
I know. We need another 3-day weekend coming up for an extra day. I get it. I hope you'll get some rest by Sunday evening. Oh. Okay. I wanted to ask you how you wanted the session to go. What would be most helpful for you? Marissa? So I'll just kind of call and just tell me what you guys, do you want me to go through the lesson or do you just want to open it up and ask questions? So I'm up for whatever will work for you all.
Maybe just kind of go through it and then some questions at the end.
Okay. Well, you can ask questions while we go through it too. Okay. Anybody else, does that work for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That sounds great.
Okay. Because I it's whatever will work for you is, what this is all about. So I'll use my lesson. Did you all get the 2 copies? I think a lot of you asked for both copies.
Was it on Canvas or did we need to email you?
You needed to email you.
Okay, I'll shoot you an email for it.
Okay, great. And then, so what I'll do is I'll go through mine and we'll just kind of talk about it. And then we can brainstorm some other ideas or ideas that you have for each of the sections. Please, tell us, because that helps everybody to inspire new ideas for themselves. Okay? Okay. Good morning, Elisa. Yeah. Do you have coffee? Awesome. Good. Okay. Great. I'll share the screen, hopefully. See if I can get this one open. Okay. Is that sharing? Do you see the lesson plan? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay. And please.
We see your files, not the lesson plan.
Oh, you don't see the lesson file? Okay. Yeah. Oh. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to go back. One day I'll have this down. Okay, now you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, every time I think I have the process, it seems like it changes, And like before we started, everybody, all of us, teachers were all trying to figure out Zoom. And we used it last year, but not as extensively as we are now. Okay, so the pre-lesson form that I asked you guys to kind of fill out, it's really like a brain storming session with yourself, is taking a look at what the standard is, what you're going to teach and the purpose, and then start to brainstorm some ideas of how you might develop that lesson. So that's what that is for. It doesn't
So that pre-lesson plan one was the one with all the green text on it?
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So that form is a brainstorming form, and that form will actually help you when you do the CalTPA, because they'll ask you to list all the student support that you're going to probably provide in your lesson and all the instructional strategies that you're going to provide. So by brainstorming through that, you're doing that thinking process of what this lesson might look like. And when you're in your own class, you know your students very well. So you have a good idea of some strategies that you might want to try. Okay, so the whole 515 was to introduce you to some basic strategies for ELs, for scaffolding, for checking for understanding. So you would have that background, some background to draw on and try and use when you start to student teach. Okay, so that's where that all came from. So that's why I asked you to, list out a couple of EL strategies, a couple of check for understandings besides the thumbs up, because that's a common one we use all the time. But, students, just like yourself, like it to be varied up. So then your next step is when you go to the lesson plan is you have that brainstorming guide, someplace to start. So on the brainstorming guide, you know what your lesson title is going to be by this time. You know what class you're teaching in grade level. And you've picked, and you know the standard that you're trying to get to. Remember, that's the destination. So then you also, if you're teaching ELs, then you look in the ELD standards and what standard is your lesson or standards going to support your ELs. And those standards they're based on language acquisition. So you look at it, is there going to be a lot of communication and pair share and partner share within your lesson plan? And if that's it, you look at the ELDs, and we'll get more into that as the semester goes, because you look into your ELD strategies and choose the, standards, and you choose the ones that fit your lesson plan, what you're focusing on. So for this one, for Rough Face Girl, in your pre-planning, a lot of you did pair share. You're doing group work, group discussions, and a lot of you had even thought about doing the storyboard or illustrations either with a partner or in a group. So that would fit the EL standard of collaboration, where your ELs have a lot of opportunity to talk and to communicate in English and also in their primary language if they need that support. Okay. And
so
go ahead.
for that, would we add another standard? And if we're doing collaboration, stuff like that for the ELD standards?
This is your collaborative standard. So you could use this one.
Okay.
Okay.
So we need that in addition to the RL 2.9?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
Okay. So I want you just to start thinking. And in your methods classes, as well as seminar, we will keep talking about the ELD standards and ELL strategies to help you with that. But this is just the beginning process so that you are introduced to it. And that's what 515 is about, is introducing. And as the semester goes, you become more of an expert. Okay. The other thing is the standard for ELD is interpretive, listening actively to a spoken English in a range of social and academic contents. So in the classroom, the lesson is being presented in this case in English with support from peers as needed for our Spanish speaking students. And they're also listening to the English and working with students that are speaking English and Spanish too. Okay, so that's why I picked those. And those are a lot of the common ones that you will see throughout lesson plans. Okay. So you will gradually become much better at choosing those, but this is the talk through. Okay. Yeah.
Professor, can I ask a question?
Yeah. Please call me Sue.
Okay, Sue. Thank you. So I'm trying to remember, but I'm seeing the CI lesson plan from like multiple areas in like our Canvas from different classes, and a couple of them are a little bit different.
Right.
So this one is the explicit instructional model. Is there like a preference as to which layout we should be using?
Okay, this layout, you're going to eventually, we're going to transition you into the standard CI lesson plan. And that's going to happen after 5:15. Okay. And, I know I push really hard because I want you guys to have this information, because all of my other 5:15 classes asked, and their recommendation, was to write up a lesson plan because they felt that that was needed. So after 3 years of teaching this, I decided to introduce this. And both Darcy and I, when we work as supervisors, we narrow down the CI lesson plan in the very beginning of your first semester so that you're concentrating on the modeling and this type. Then we will go to the CI lesson plan, which is very similar to this. This just has a lot of information on how to write it up. Okay, so then if you go through it, once you look at the CI lesson plan, you'll see that it basically follows this format. But what I took out for the beginning of the semester is the UDL, Universal Design for Learning. And now in seminar classes, we will go more in depth in those, and then you'll add that. So that will look like the CI lesson plan.
Okay.
Okay, and
So,
then, yeah.
for working through this assignment, if like we feel that we're confident enough to go through the like the final CI lesson plan with the UDL, would you encourage us to do that plan?
Yes, I would.
Okay.
And then referring to this plan only with the details of what needs to go in those areas. Okay, because if you
Okay.
look at the CI lesson plan, it just has the sequence of instruction.
Mhm.
So where are you going to get that sequence of instruction? That would be right here, the instructional sequence. So if
Okay.
you get tied up and you're confused, then you just go back to this lesson plan, look at the gray down boxes, and it will give you a little bit of an explanation of what
Okay.
goes there. Yeah, so I definitely, if you feel confident, please go for it, because you can't go wrong. There's no right or wrong to this. Assignment is just getting that practice and taking that initial leap and giving it a try.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So then in even the CI lesson plan and the Cal TPA, you're going to have to, state your purpose and your learning objectives. Okay. So we want to make sure that our learning objectives are aligned with the purpose. And remember, the purpose is not your standard that you're working towards, not this particular standard. What it is a lesson that you're being taught. This lesson is a lesson, just think of it as in a series of lessons that are going and supporting that standard, getting the students to that mastery level of the standard. So the purpose, when you write the purpose and your objectives, they're just for that lesson. What do you want the students to learn, be able to do at the end of this lesson? Okay, not the end of the road. Okay, and then the objectives are specific to that lesson. And how to think of it, because now you have this brainstorming chart. Okay, what is the sequence of things that you're going to do with the students? What are you going to do first? What are you going to do second? What are you going to do third? And so forth until you get to the closure of your lesson. So you think of those, and then what learning objectives are those? So you kind of look at each activity or combination of activities and build your objectives on the sequence of the lesson. Okay, so first of all, in this lesson, I'm going to read the story and ask the students to identify those elements. After we read the story or during the reading of the story, I'm going to stop and pause, ask them what they think. What are you wondering about? Who are the characters? What do you think about this particular character? And those kind of things. So I'm going to build that understanding and bridging that understanding while I'm reading it aloud, so that at the end of reading aloud as a class, and during the guided modeling that we're able to identify these elements. Okay. The other part of this is that I want the students to recognize and be able to explain what the lesson is of a folktale or fable, because they all have lessons. And remember, the students have been exposed to that. So I'm going to ask them to explain it. So when I get to my guided reading, my guided part, we're going to have that conversation. I'm going to work with the whole class in guided instruction because we're all at different levels. So I'm going to bring in some visuals and things, and we're going to, as a class, fill out that story map together. They're going to be answering the questions. I'm going to be guiding them. I'm going to write it so they can write it. I'm going to do visuals. I'm going to have that anchor chart. So all of those things are happening in guided practice. So I want them to be able to explain it, the lesson and them to orally or also in writing in the independent practice. So, yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, no, just keep asking.
Thank you.
Please, I don't like to talk so much.
I'm like, oh, I talk a lot, so I'll help you.
Go ahead.
The purpose of the lesson, will that be the same for all of our lesson plans?
A few of you have branched out a little bit and have actually focused on some other purpose, which was great. They took it a little bit differently, and that's fine. My thought is for most everyone, just for the initial plan, was to write up this one. But if you have something else in mind, go ahead and give it a shot.
Okay.
Okay.
But our lesson plan through will all be a little bit different, even if our purpose is the same. Yeah.
Yes, right. And remember, you're individuals and you all have different ideas. So I almost hated to write this up, but I felt this is a rough draft and it would give you an idea of how to get started. Okay, but tweak it to make it yours. That's the important thing, explore out. So then my culminating activity or assignment is going to be have the students remember to do that storyboard, and they're going to illustrate each of those elements and also state the lesson and do an illustration on what the lesson is. And with that, they'll be able to be a little bit creative, because how are they visually going to represent the lesson or the moral of the story? So that's kind of fun. And then that'll be fun to walk around and see what they're doing and have them explain their thinking to me. Why did you choose to draw that? What does that represent? And that is pushing the students a little bit higher on that critical thinking and thinking skills, is by having them actually come up and visualize what is good versus evil. What does it look like in this story? So I think you'd see some creative work. And plus, having the storyboard, we have students that are visual learners. We have students that may be, they're at the emerging level in language. And so we want them to be able to express themselves. And then with this, writing the simple sentence, it would be your choice as a teacher to provide story frames, sentence frames for those that need it, like I said before, and those that don't need it can just write their own sentence. If a student has academic background in Spanish and they're not there in English, they can write it in Spanish. So you would count that as proficient as well, because they can articulate what was the elements of the story. Okay, so is that clear? Any other questions? I wish I could see everybody around. Okay, then the prior knowledge came from that background knowledge. So just remember, when you're student teaching in a class or have your own class, you will have that information. So for my seminar classes, and I'm going to share with Darcy, I have a lot of samples of students that have done case studies and done assets and funds of knowledge for students. And so I will be sharing those, and we will read those, look at them, and draw out what background knowledge the students have and their assets and learning needs. Okay. And when they talk about this, remember, we're in a different model, student assets and learning needs, than the deficit model. That's, your culturally responsive teaching, and everything that you've probably read is that students bring assets and background knowledge and different things to enrich our classrooms. So we look at those and we try to tie in their interests, their backgrounds in to the stories. So for instance, maybe I'll share it out. There's a gal that did a great lesson on a story about a little student, that child, I guess, who had traveled and migrated into another country. So it was part of their curriculum. And so a lot of her students had also migrated from Central America and also Mexico. And so she tied that in, and everyone shared, and they got a big map, and they pinpointed where everybody came from and how they got there. So they got to tell their story and how it related with the story that they were studying. So that's what they're talking about, tying in student interests and their experiences into the lessons that you're teaching. And that is such a plus to bring that in. And remember, when you make connections with your students from prior experience and knowledge, the learning is so much greater. Okay, so that's where I got this, that the students love to read. This is from that background that I gave you. So the students in this class love to read, and they enjoy the folk tales. They like to be read to. And some of them, from their different cultures and from their grandparents, shared folk tales from their home and from their background. So the teacher would tie those in. It was like the oral storytelling. And they also found that this story, Cinderella, was entertaining, and they're acquainted with it. And we'd seen the video, and I read the story to them. So they had that background information, and also the elements they had been exposed to that. Then I took from several of you the academic language that I felt that they would use in the future. So when your academic language, when you're doing an activity, you don't want to have too many words, because one, that's overwhelming to the students. Two, it's probably not necessary. So anywhere from 6 to 8 words in the primary grades are about what they can learn in a day, or keep their attention to. So these words would be very helpful, and most all the words that all of you chose. I've just been starting to read all those and grade them. But invisible, idle is one that is not common in primary language. Callous is another one. Truthful, tended would be something that they might not be familiar with. It's not a word that I actually use very often. I don't build any campfires, but tended, I probably wouldn't use that myself. And chapped is something that they need to work. And then these words, they all will be using in the future in their everyday conversation, as well as be reading. Okay, so these are good words that were chosen. And then the student grouping is, how are you going to group your students? And this is in the CI lesson plan in the Cal TPA too, is how are you going to group them, and why are you grouping them that way? So I'm doing whole group. So I'm going to read the story aloud. I can have them close to me. We can work on the vocabulary together. And it's just a family and a relaxed community when we are sitting together on the carpet. And then I know that everybody's there and attentive and involved. So the other thing, So during independent practice, though, I'm going to have them go back to their groups, okay? And I'm going to group them by their, in their groups, I have them heterogeneously already sitting together. So I have planned out carefully where my students are sitting so that there are supports at that table for students that need it. So if I have an emerging or even an extended language learner, I'm going to try to place a student that speaks both languages, that's pretty fluent, probably one that's bridging if possible in that group, so that that group student can provide support in English and Spanish to the student. I also would be putting a student that is at a lower level reading with another student that was at least the average range or above, so that they can support each other. So what you're looking for is peer support, peer understanding. But you have, you know, and then you carefully place, there are some students that are more impatient with other students. So you want to make sure that you know your students and how you're placing them. Okay. So is there any questions on that? So you look at thoughtfully, how are you going to group your kids? What's going to be best for your students? And then you explain why you chose that. Okay. So I'm choosing the storyboard activity in a group. Why do you think?
So
Professor,
Yes, Haley.
go ahead, Ani.
I was just I was just gonna ask, since you had said that you want to choose what is best for your group of students, is this something that you might change year to year depending on the group of students that you have?
Oh, yes, and you can change it quite often in the classroom during the whole year. You'll see how, you know, sometimes you think you've done the right job, or also remember kids are learning, and so they're getting, you know, different levels all the time. There's changing. So you would group and regroup all the time throughout the year. Okay. Haley?
I just wanted to ask, what exactly is a storyboard activity?
Oh, storyboard is, you know, the illustrations.
Oh, it's a group of illustrations. Okay.
Okay.
That's what I was like, that's what I was thinking, but I wanted to be sure because I was debating on including it in mine. And I'm like, is
What
that
is
something
that?
I could?
Yeah, so this is a rough, you know, if you just Google images, storyboard images, there's tons of them out there, and for free, then you can make your own. I just did this so you guys could see quickly. But I would have, you know, this would be larger if it's second grade. You know, they have that larger paper that you run off 12 by 18 and those kinds of things. So you consider the age of your students and their writing because they're printing big. So I would have a larger one. I just can't fit it on your screen, on my screen. And they would need larger boxes to illustrate in, bigger lines. So you could
And
also,
this
go ahead.
would also like cover their assessment of a simple sentence as well, right?
Exactly. So you're doing two things with this. You know, they're showing you visually what they understand, and then they're going to write the sentence. So sentence frames, you can do it two ways. You can write the sentence frames up on the whiteboard, or, you know, on sentence strips, or you think of the age of your students. Sometimes some students have a hard time going from the paper to the whiteboard. So for some of my students, I would actually print part of the sentence frame on here and then let them finish it. Okay, and you can, that's called you know, differentiation. And I would have blank pieces for those students that would ask for them because they wanted to write on their own. So that's a little bit differentiation. Okay. If your students, you have a couple students or some of your students are Spanish speakers only, you could write this in Spanish, doing a sentence frame. Okay. Because most of us in our schools have translators if you're not proficient, or if you have principals that are proficient in in Spanish, and in writing, you can ask them too. But we usually have translators that are able to do that really quickly for you if you're not sure. Okay. All right, so that's what that is. Any other questions on that?
Oh, I just have a question that popped up to my mind right now.
Of course.
I'm imagining in the guided practice, creating a storyboard with them, and maybe like having a poster of it. When they get assessed, should that poster be removed and like placed somewhere where they can't see it, or can they use it as a reference? What would you say?
I think using it as a reference, because remember, this is informative assessment, and you want good teaching, you know, if everything works well and you have enough time, having the model and the right model is as a resource is perfect. And keeping that up there for the next lessons or other things that are coming, then they can go and look at that. And you're teaching them two things. They're getting they're revisiting the information. They're also learning how to use resources that are available to them. So that's awesome. And they need that model. Not all about gotcha and, ooh, I want to grade you. It's all about, gee, how can I get you there? It's just like what I did, in thinking about having an alternative science assignment to the lesson. That's differentiation. Because so now there's 2 assignments for the end of 5:15, and I'm letting students choose which one, and that's differentiation. Which are you more comfortable with? Where do you think you're ready for? And then we go from there. Okay. Right.
And on that note, for the assignment where it's the lesson plan analysis, if we choose to do the lesson plan, we don't need to turn in the analysis, correct?
Correct. You do one
Okay.
or the other. Okay. Yeah. Only one.
Should we plan on incorporating a storyboard into our lessons, or do you want us to do something completely different?
That is up to you. That's your discretion as the teacher. So if you, a few people came up with some other ideas. One was a book jacket. I can't remember who that was because I have 88 students, so it's hard to remember. And another one came up with not only doing the storyboard, but coming up with like an exit ticket at the closure, when you close the lesson, doing an exit ticket, asking a question, or drawing out one of the vocabulary words. Or someone else suggested 3, 2, 1. I thought was a really good idea as closure. 3 things that you learned, 2 things you have questions about, and I can't remember what the other one is. It's not off the top of my head if any of you know that. But we'll have that. So that was in one of the strategies, check for understanding. So feel free. If you want to create, I want you to do that. Remember, this is just a rough and just my thought processes. Okay, good. Because I love it when everybody's more creative than I am. I'm kind of like, so that's why. I think it's my administrative part of me. Alrighty. So then the other thing is, and I went way overboard on this because I just wanted you guys to get, some ideas. So the anticipatory set is really important because you want to get the kids into the lesson and get excited. So the hook is something that you use to start your lesson. And so you think about, okay, so what do my students like? Okay, well, and what have we been studying, and how can I correlate all of this? Well, okay, so in 2nd grade, they study habitats. Okay, and they also study the past, Ventura County and Santa Barbara County, where we have the Shumash. And so Shumash are part of the history learning in 2nd grade. So students love the habitat study. They're doing well. That's in our science and history. We've been exploring the Shumash and where they lived and their culture and their customs. So this is also a Native American folktale. So I know that they would be interested in learning more. So we also have community circles in our classroom, or or whatever you want to call it. There's so many names for it. So what I did was I thought, okay, I'm going to play a drum song from the Indian, the Native American tribe, where Rough Face Girl comes from. I'm going to have them come into a circle with the drum music and have them all sit down. And then I'm going to introduce what the story is about. So I can just read this to you once the students are on the carpet. So when you write up your lesson plan, traditionally, and you use T for teacher and S for students. And I have to tell you, it takes me a while to get into that mode. So when I was writing this, I'm always writing out teacher or I. But for Cal TPA and many of your supervisors, your student teacher supervisors, when you write this, you use T for teacher and S for students. Okay. So I want you to get into that. And I have to tell you, I had to go back and change this a little for my model too. So teacher asks the students to come to the carpet for their reading and telling the stories, students to sit in the carpet. And then when coming to the carpet, T will play a drum song from the tribe. And once the students are on the carpet, T will explain that today we will be reading a folktale story from the Algonquin tribe titled Rough Face Girl. Teacher will tell the students about the talking circles of the Algonquin. So I'm going to relate why they sit in a circle, and maybe the students will even relate it back to the shoe mash, and that the circle allows for all of us to have an opportunity to be heard, and then also respect, and then I'm going to show them in Zoom, because we're studying habitat, and in second grade it's kind of a hard concept to figure out where we are in California, and the Algonquins are up in Quebec, Canada. So I'm going to take Zoom Google Earth. And we've used that before, where I've come down and zoomed on Camarillo or Ocean View. This is where the students are from. And then show them from where we are, zoom across the United States, and then dive down in to the Ottawa River in Quebec. And what they're going to see is green foliage. And then I'm going to ask them, what do you think this habitat is? And they're going to say forest, probably because it's green. And so then we just do a little background information, and I'm going to show some pictures of where they are, and then ask them, what kind of food do you think they ate and why? And give them just a little bit of background. Okay, so that's how, having the drums, doing the Google Earth, talking about the shoe mash, talking about habitats, I'm relating all the things that they learned and know to the new material. Okay, so that's what you want to think. So hook is something fun, something to interest. Okay, so do you guys have any ideas about any hooks that you might have thought about or anticipated? Okay.
I was gonna say I thought I had one, but it's like I really don't know like if it would like half of the ideas I have would work, because I know it needs to be an attention getter.
Yeah, well,
And like
share them with us.
well, I was just trying to think like probably more ask them like what their favorite fairy tales are and get them to talking more instead of like you doing the drum stuff, because I know some students could be sensitive to that.
That's true. Yeah. For, you mean the drumming or the culture?
More of the drumming, like the noise.
Right. And that's a really good point, Haley. Because if you have autistic students with, sound area, so that would be perfect, and also I like that you would relate it to the other way, going with the fairy tales and sharing that, because that would get them excited too. That's good. Anybody else?
I think I'd like to put in maybe some art or some photos of artifacts from this particular tribe and show them like, oh, here's what pottery, or I don't know too much about this particular tribe, so it's something that I'd need to research, but maybe showing them some tools that they used or some things that were important to them, and just kind of showing them that this is a real, these are real people that are telling the story.
Yeah, that would be really good. And if you looked on there, I gave under here more info and more. They show artifacts. They do have totems, so that was awesome. So that students love those, and they show a lot of the flora and fauna around there. So that's a great idea. That would get them really into it, especially if they've studied Shumash too. So they could like compare and contrast the differences of where the Shumash live, where this tribe lives, what the artifacts look like. So that's excellent. And also the fairy tale one is good. So see, you guys have lots of good ideas. Anybody?
Can I, sorry to interrupt, but I remember, because I grew up in Santa Barbara County, and I think we went to a field trip, and that's how they incorporated it. Like we went to a field trip and they like discussed about like the tribes, and then they had like little workshops where you could like weave your basket and stuff like that. I don't remember where, but it was like a 1-day like trip where we like left at 7 and then we got to explore, and there was like, depending on what caught your interest, you were able to do a little workshop.
And they still have that, but not right now. But as soon as at the Santa Barbara History Museum. And the wonderful news is, I'm going to give you a secret. If you're in a Title I school, they will help with the cost of the bus, and it's free. So it's awesome. And you're like you said, that's a great field trip. I'm so happy they still have that. So hopefully that'll be available to you all next year. So it's cool. Yeah. And so that's a neat thing too, if you can time it all at nearly the same time. So with a big study, it's awesome. Okay, anybody else? Okay, onward. All right, so then in your opening of your lesson, you have that anticipatory set. And then also the opening in your lesson, you're going to inform the students about your purpose. Now, I have this in a sequential order. I'm not sequential, just in an order. And all the lesson plan formats that you see have this in this kind of an order. But when you're delivering and talking with the kids and teaching, you don't have to go, okay, anticipatory set. Now I'm going to say objectives, and now I'm going to reteach. It kind of can start to blend in. Okay, but this is how you get your ideas down. And when you are beginning teachers and student candidates, it's good to write it in detail what you might say. As you get more proficient, like in second semester, we don't require you to say, I'm going to say, they're going to say, that kind of thing, okay? But for right now, you want to get all your thoughts down, because when you get in front of a classroom, you've already practiced in your mind and while you're typing this up. So the flow of the lesson, and you know what's coming next, what you're going to do, helps you, because it is, and people are watching you teach, your master teacher and your supervisors. It really helps to relieve some of that stress. Okay. All right. So in this, I'm talking about what I might say as a purpose. So I've done the anticipatory set. So in my mind, I went ahead and wrote up what I would say next is what the purpose of today's lesson is: to listen to the story of Rough-Faced Girl and to identify the story elements of the folktale. Okay. Teacher will go to the learning objectives, I can statements. And so most of the classrooms in Ventura County and in specific districts, they ask the teacher, and you're required on the board to write the learning goals. So, which is cool, because you're going to tell the students what the learning goals is. And we know that other people like to read it. So you're going to have them there posted so the students know what they're going to learn by the end of this lesson. And the research has shown over and over again that if students know where this is headed and what is expected, and like Veronica was saying about the storyboard, that helps. So in my classrooms, I always did this. I didn't necessarily write it up, but now I do, is like the I can statement. So I'm going to say, I will read the statements to them and we will talk about it. Does this remind you of anything else that we've done in the past? And they should come up with, well, if they studied Cinderella, oh yeah, we did this in Cinderella. Okay, we're going to do this in Rough Faced Girl. And you're going to be able to determine the lesson that is learned. And you're also going to be able to describe the elements of the story in pictures and writing. So as I'm telling them that, I'm going to be showing them, I don't know where the story map is. I would show them the story map. We're going to work on this together as a whole class and identify these elements for Rough Faced Girl after I read you the story. And then I'm going to send you back in your groups, and with your partners, you're going to complete. You're going to be able to illustrate the story and write a sentence describing each of the elements. So they know what is expected, what they're going to learn, and what each step looks like, so they don't have to guess. And for your students that may be on the autism spectrum, they need that. We call that the menu. They need to know what is going to happen for this whole lesson. It gives, and actually gives all the students comfort. It doesn't matter who you are, because you like to know what you're going to do and why you're going to do it. Okay. Then this is where I would go back into the story of Cinderella, and you saw how I linked that back up here when I was talking about Rough Faced Girl. Like, oh, we did this already, this part. And that makes them feel comfortable because it's not something totally new. And then I would also, in the pre-teach or reteach, work on the vocabulary words that we selected so that they have that, we call that front loading. So you front loaded the words that they need. Okay. But it still, when you're reading the story, you're going to identify those words. You might show a picture of Rough Faced Girl. What can you tell me about her? What does she look like? What do you notice? And then you can link in the rough, or tended the fire is why she has a rough skin and why it's chapped. Okay, so you talk about those things through the story. And some of the examples I've seen online, they just don't really do that, but that's what you would be doing if you were the teacher. Okay. Any questions? Okay, so let's talk about vocabulary activities. Okay, I keep harping about the kids being interactive and engaged. So how can we do this? What are some ideas?
I think that anchor charts can kind of be used for a vocabulary activity, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, being a very visual learner, I love when a teacher draws in front of the class. So like having one of the vocabulary words like chapped, and then like drawing an example of like, oh, in the winter when your lips get dry, you know how they crack sometimes and they get chapped, and then drawing a visual like that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Instead of just having a picture, I like that. That's great. Good idea. Yeah. So you do it with them, and they can help you describe it. That's awesome. Veronica.
Oh, I'm not sure if it would work, but I have worked in classrooms where the teachers, they tape a picture of whatever they're going to be working on around the classroom, and students go around, and below it they attach a sheet where they can write their ideas on what it can mean or what it represents. Maybe we could do that like with the kind of like what we did in groups in the slides. Put the name of the word and then like an image, and maybe have them brainstorm on what they think it can mean, and then maybe go into an anchor chart, because I really like that idea too.
Oh, I like that. That's good. The nice thing about that is you're including movement with your students. So getting them up off the carpet before you read the story, it's like a break, and kids need that movement, and then you're also providing conversation and communication. That's excellent idea. Good. Anybody else? These are great ideas.
I think I like the idea of going over with the students what the words mean, and then maybe asking them, how can you show this with your body? So like for idle, and then have them maybe brainstorm what that looks like, and maybe have a couple students show their example of what that looks like to them, or what it looks like for them to be idle.
Oh, that's great. I like that too. That's that total response method. So that's cool. I love that. Good. And then find something rough. They'd have to find something rough to share, what that would be. Okay. Oh, those are good. See, vocabulary doesn't have to be writing the word, writing the definition, ugh, you know, putting it into a sentence. I remember doing that and hating it growing up. So I always remember that as a teacher. Now I'm not doing that. Anybody else?
I have an idea to add kind of into what everybody else had said already. I think it would be fun, and also to get them moving, to have like the pictures like on the board, and then give them like you know, like maybe like a flashcard or a post-it note to say, if you think idle, put idle where you think the definition is. So they're gonna look at the picture, and then they're gonna stick their sticky depending on where they think it means, and then.
Oh, that's good too. I like that. I hope
And
you
then
guys are, yeah.
yeah, and then they just afterwards, the teacher could just say, "Oh, you know, okay, well, yeah, you guys were right. Most of you guys got chap right, or whatever." And then
Yeah, those are good. Those are all good. I hope you guys are writing all your ideas down. These are excellent. You'll be able to use these. Good. Anybody else? Okay. I think those are excellent ideas. Okay, so these areas are all in the CI lesson plan, the other one. Okay. Okay, so detailed instructional sequence. Okay, so I know that in your other classes, like this particular lesson plan is really good for language arts and teaching basic skills of math and the basic skills of language arts and your usual language arts traditional lesson. Okay. And in science, you're working on the 5E model. And this will help you with the writing of that, you know, what format and things to say and how to get it. So just be open-minded that there's different instructional models, and you're going to learn a variety of them. Okay, so this is your basic model. And then in your other classes in history, you start out with the essential questions. With science, you're going to be exploring and expanding and so forth. So these are wonderful, different models to choose from. So you're going to come out with a lot of tools and be able to select what ones you will use for particular lessons. Okay. So there's not always one way to teach everything. All right.
So,
yes.
Can I ask another question?
Yes, because you stimulate the other questions.
I'm a talker, and I always have like thoughts going on in my head.
You'll be a great teacher.
Thank you. In a lot of our classes, we're learning about how everything is like interconnected, and how like one storybook can lead into a lesson about science and history and math, like all at the same time. Mm-hmm. So is there like a lesson plan format, or like some kind of like planning format for something that, for a lesson that you would want to connect to multiple subject areas?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just, you know, you just, I don't think that there's like a standard lesson format for that. You would start, as you get a little more experience, you would start formulating that on your own. Like for instance, with this is based on folktales, but also remember, I'm linking it back to the Shumash. They're learned about the Shumash. I'm also linking it into their science on habitat. So when I zoom in on global or Google Earth, we're talking about habitat. And then we're going to explore the habitat, that it's a forest habitat and there's rivers. And they actually have some photographs, like Elisa was talking about, which you can show what the area and the habitat looks like. And then I would compare it with our habitat here in California and the Shumash habitat. So that's how you do that. So you're building and connecting. So you're building and connecting on previous learning, previous experiences. So when you write up your lesson plans, whatever format you're using, you know, you do that with. And that's why that pre-planning is important to give it some thought for that interconnection. I hope that helps a little. You can use the CI plan for that. It's just, you know, how you just orchestrate it, you know. So these are your basic steps, but then like for the prior knowledge one in this, I might, in the Alleghenies, I might spend more time on that, you know, if I wanted to make it a more interconnected, you know. So we might take time before I even read Rough Faced Girl on the habitat and the customs of that particular Native American tribe. Okay, and then compare and contrast it, which is another big skill and standard with the Shumash. And then I would take the habitat and compare it with our habitat. So that's all that interconnection. So if that was one of the purposes, that might be one of the lessons for Rough Faced Girl, is to spend time doing that. And then you would stop, and then the next day you go into the next lesson. Okay. And just remember, one lesson that you plan, sometimes it needs to be actually 2 days or more. So don't let time, like, oh my gosh, I have to send this whole lesson in 45 minutes. You may spend a lot more time on certain areas of interest and needs. So then just be flexible, and you're just gonna start the next day on the rest of the lesson. So remember that happens. And a lot of times student teachers freak out. Oh my God. And they try to like cram all the other parts in that 45-minute section, not realizing that, you know what, this has to go to the next day. Okay. And you let your kids know that too.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I have been worrying a little bit too much about like the exact format of the lesson plan instead of just like thinking about how I'm going to implement it in person, like with students. How often are teachers actually like evaluated on their formal lesson plans? Like when we're in a classroom and like I have this plan for the Rough Faced Girl and this is my plan on paper, but it doesn't exactly match up to what happens in person. Are teachers going to be like evaluated by the principals or somebody who comes into our classroom and be like, oh, like this lesson plan is like not following through, or like I just don't know, like how often are we going to be evaluated by like our formal lesson plans? Or
Okay, yeah. So what happens is you'll start taking small groups, and you know, to teach small groups, and we'll do a little bit of work on that. And then you gradually are added more takeover. So you would probably start to take over the language arts, and then eventually the math, then the history and science. Okay, so it's a gradual release model. And in a semester, student teachers or teacher candidates, you're formally observed by your supervisor and collaborating with your CT, your cooperating teacher or master teacher 6 times in a semester. Okay. And the idea is for growth. You're not going, if you're putting effort and you're trying and you've put a lesson plan together, you're and you show growth throughout the semester, that's what we're looking for, not perfection, because we're all growing and learning, and we're there to support your learning. So when you're observed the 6 times, that's when you write up a formal lesson plan to detail. for your
Okay,
super.
will that be the same like when we are in our job placements, like next school year, hopefully, when we're all in a public school teaching, when we're observed, is that going to be like a similar process?
Okay, when you're observed by a principal, okay,
Mhm.
yeah. So each district has different. What's the word I'm looking for? Different.
Procedures?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So, for instance, in one district, it's really with your teacher union and the HR department and the Board of Education and superintendent, how many times you are formally observed during the year.
Mhm.
Okay. So that is a contract. It's under the contract, and that's negotiated. So that would depend on your district. Most districts have about 3 formal observations by the principal. Then there's also informative assessment. In other words, your principal will drop in, just stop, see how you're doing, check in with you, have check-in conversations and those kinds of things. And principals' jobs are not just to manage the school, it's also to support the teachers and help them grow as well. So think of it in those terms. It's not a negative. And as a new teacher, you're on probation for 2 years. So your first year as a probationary teacher, whatever they've been negotiated is the number of times you will have a formal lesson. Okay. And it's also the negotiation team and the principal and superintendent what kind of a lesson plan you have to have. Okay. Everybody's required by the state to turn in lesson plans. Are they as detailed as this? No. You could not write a detailed lesson plan every day for every subject. Okay. This is a learning piece, is what you guys have. Okay. And then the second year of probation is the same. And once you have passed both probations, then you become tenured, which means, yeah, I know, you have a much better chance of staying. Okay. Okay. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you, Sue.
Okay. Any others on that?
I just thought we were going to have to do stuff like this every day.
Oh, God, no. Please. That would kill all of us as teachers. No, this is teacher candidacy. Okay.
Okay. That makes me feel so much better.
Right. And remember, this is a learning tool and required for your preliminary credential. So we have to have on file formal lesson plans and formal observations. Okay. And we have to prove that at the university. So when you start doing that, you will upload this into Canvas or whatever else we're using. And then that's how we document it. Okay. So for CTC and also to be accredited. So it's all that twofold. So we can prove that you've done this. Okay. All right. So isn't that a relief? Yes.
It's a giant relief.
I know. So just think of this as a learning tool. These are your formal observation pieces. You know, when you start student teaching, you're not going to write one of these up for every single thing that you do. Okay. So that will be between your classroom teacher and your supervisor. We can ask as supervisors for more than 6 observations as well if needed. So, but don't worry, you all are going to do great. All right. Okay. So this is the writing of the modeling, the I do, we do. And when you write this up for now, I want you to write up kind of what your a narrative or a script of what you are going to say, what you want to ask the kids, and what you think how the kids will respond. So always set in each of these, and because I was reading the new Cal TPA and had a workshop on that, they are looking for in your videos, and this is also good teaching strategy to set the purpose and learning expectations for each of the sections that you're going to. So I've already told them what we're going to do, but now when I go into modeling, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to set the purpose for the modeling, that we're going to read the story aloud. And during the story and after the story, we're going to identify the story elements. So that is setting the purpose of this section. So students know what they're going to do and what they're supposed to be looking for. And you always want to give students the focus so that they know what they're supposed to be focused on when you're reading or whatever you're doing. Because when students don't have that focus, they're just all over the place. So always set the focus for your lesson or for that part of the lesson. Okay, so before reading aloud, teacher will ask students to restate the purpose of today's lesson. So what are we going to be looking for? That's the purpose. So when I'm reading to you, what should you be thinking about? Okay, and then you have the students. As much student response as you can get is better than just me, like me just talking at you. Okay. And then with the students, have you been introduced to print concepts in the picture walk by your literature teacher?
Print concepts, yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so with our primaries and even with sometimes with our upper grades, you can do print concepts. How about picture walk through the story? Okay, so that would be the next step. And actually with our upper grades, we do a picture walk too through the literature. So the picture walk is not, it's just casual. So after you do your print concepts, then you show the book, the illustrations of the book. Okay, so what do you see in this picture? What do you think is happening? Who do you think these people are? And so with rough-faced girl, I would hope that they would look, oh, look, it looks like there's something on her face. And then I would walk through and have them. I'm sorry, I couldn't understand.
Sorry, I forgot to mute my mic. It was my daughter speaking.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. She's so cute. I'm going, hi. Okay. You know, and so I will show some videos on some of that, how you start in a small group. And this is probably one of your first type of lessons that you would do in the classroom, is work with a small reading group, you know, a small group. So that would probably be one of your first. Okay, so next, viewing the illustration story, asking questions. What do you think is happening? Why do you think that is happening? Does this remind you of anything? So you're trying to make those connections when they see the pictures. Oh, that kind of reminds me of Cinderella, because she's dirty too, you know, after, you know, working around the house. So anyhow, so you're trying to make those connections. And then I would tell them, I'm going to read the story to them. And when I read a vocabulary word or a tier 3 that's not introduced, I would stop, discuss that word with the students, put it into language that they would understand, then reiterate the word and continue reading. Also during the reading, I would stop and ask questions and plan to make this interactive with the students. So I would have to write this up a little bit. That's my notes to myself, is that how am I going to have the students be interactive? Pair share? Anything else? Because during the reading, you know, it's a story and kids can get restless and their minds start to drift if you don't get them interactive in the story. So that's why you stop, you show the page, you talk about the vocabulary, you do pair share. And then all of that is helping them comprehend the story and keeping their attention. Okay. And then on this section of each of the sections in all of your lesson planning is how will you check for understanding and what questions might you ask. So you're thinking and predetermining some things that you might do. So what kind of strategies could I use in the modeling, in the guided reading, and in the independent practice? And what are some of the specific questions I might ask the students? And so I already have some of these up here, but I would also rewrite them down here. Okay. Anything about that? Okay. Dialogue and questioning, and I know that Carol Lee emphasizes this do is so important, because the questioning techniques, so you want to build your repertoire of that. So we'll be concentrating on that because discourse, classroom discourse is very important bit, and the interaction between the teacher and the student to the student. So with the questioning and the checking for understanding, you're trying to get the students to start thinking metacognition and thinking on their own to the next level. And so this is important. So you will hopefully grow in the questioning techniques this year. Then the guided practice, again, okay, students, tell the students and explain to the students what they're going to do. Okay, and then be specific on how you want them to return to your seats. Set purpose and learning expectations and how you expect the students to move from one place to the other. Okay, remember students, I excuse you by rows. How do we move when we move from the carpet to our desks? Have the students, somebody reiterate how they do it, and then excuse them. So always tell them up front what you want them to do, and then you can model it or have a student model it, and then go forward. Okay. Any questions?
I have a question, Professor,
Yes.
or Sue, sorry.
Thank you.
So while you're reading the story, would that be a good time to stop and reflect on the vocabulary that they, that they were just introduced to, and take a break and write it on a word wall, or would you wait until after the lesson to do that?
Well, you could write it on, if you write it on the word wall, that might definitely stop and talk about the vocabulary during the story and talk about how it's used here and its meaning, because that's what's going to help them make that connection and learn that word. With the word wall, I might do that at the end or as a review the following day as well. Yeah, it might interrupt. You'd have to judge for yourself because you know your class, but it might.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it might interrupt the flow, and then do it again as a review and with a word wall the following day would be cool.
Thanks.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so with this, I didn't write any more of what I would say, what I would do. I just put some helpful hints in here. So let's just, if you have any other questions about the guided practice. So guided practice, in this lesson plan, I was really going to do a lot of guided practice with writing up the elements. In some cases, like with math, you would do a couple of problems together. You would write the problem, have the students solve the problem, then work through that problem together again. Then you might give them a second math problem, work through it. You would be able to determine at that point after the second problem if they were ready for independent practice or not. So if I had in the guided reading practice section, I had students that were ready to move on their own and independent, I would let them do that because I'd been observing who gets it, who doesn't, who needs extra help. And then the students that need extra help, I would pull them as a group and continue the guided practice in reteaching. Okay. And then once I felt they were confident enough to try it on their own, I would excuse them back to do the independent activity. So that's what a math would look like for skills. Okay. But this one is pretty directed, this guided practice. Remember, they've already known what the elements are. And so now we're going to talk it through and write it through together. Okay, because I also have a lot of ELs in my classroom and some struggling readers. So I want to make sure that they get it. Okay, then the independent practice is where they will stay in their seats and work on their storyboard. So I would set the expectations of how I expect them to work, what they should accomplish, and get them started and make sure that I have teamed them up with the right people to work with. And then what does a teacher do during independent practice? Go back.
Walks around.
Exactly. And you're going to stop at every group. And it's important that you stop not only at the students that are having difficulty, but those that get it and are independent, because you don't want to leave them out, because they feel like they don't really get any attention, that everybody's spending it on the students that are having a more difficult time. So when you stop at every group, make sure you're circling the group or this pair that are having a difficulty. You're going to spend more time with them, get them started, asking them questions, and helping them get going. Okay. And then you also, for the groups that are working more independently, have questions. You want to ask them questions. Tell me about your picture. What does this represent? How are you going to do your illustrate the moral to this story? What are your thoughts on that? So you want to make sure that you connect with them, that you're asking them questions too, and try to push them to a little bit higher level. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. And then closure to a lesson is very important, because it kind of solidifies everything that you were doing. So closure can be in this lesson, it could be at your desk, but we've been working really hard and the kids need probably a break. So I'm probably going to have them come to the carpet first to do my closure, and help. They're going to help me summarize what we've learned, summarize the story, summarize the elements. And then, well, some of you all came up with, do a gallery walk, so they could leave their storyboards on the desk, and this would be a great time. They could gallery walk through, and make sure you tell them how they're to do that. Train them. Always train your kids up front on the routines and procedures. And if this is the first time they've done a gallery walk, before you excuse them to do that, you're going to model what a gallery walk looks like and what they should be doing and how they should behave before you excuse them. And then you get them started. And a gallery walk is great, especially if the next thing is recess. You can walk right out. Okay. And so, it just depends on when that is. The other thing someone came up with was that exit ticket idea, and another one, the 3, 2, 1. And then if I didn't do the gallery walk, I would hang. Your classroom should have student work everywhere, and you change it up. You don't leave the Halloween essay up through Christmas, which I've seen, and that just drives me crazy. You change it all the time. And students and parents love to help you do that, so you don't always have to do it by yourself. Upper graders, they do everything in the classroom. They need to have that responsibility. But by having student work up, it makes it their class. Everybody's work is up and recognized and feels good. Okay, so don't go out and buy pre-made posters. Make your anchor charts. Hang that student work up. That's what you want to see, and the kids want to see their work. So you don't have to spend a lot of money. My first year of teaching, I had no money, and I ended up, it was a long time ago, ended up making everything out of construction paper. And then I realized, because I was teaching 5th or 6th grade, oh, I don't have to do this myself. Put the kids' work up. Get them decorating the classroom. And so it made it their classroom. So it's our community. So, and then assessment piece. Type of assessments that you are using are informative assessments. So tell me, what is informative assessment? What is it good for?
I think students feel less pressure during informal assessments and are more likely to share their ideas, especially if it's like an informal assessment on the carpet where everybody is sharing out the different knowledge that they know. Formal assessments make me nervous, so I think I think informal assessments are really good for students who are a little bit more nervous test takers or quiz takers.
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, and more people will share. Also, the students learn from each other. And Your ELs here, conversation and collaboration, communication. And students, by sharing, get other ideas from other students, and they learn from the students. So that part is so important. And don't ever hesitate, because sometimes we all get in a hurry. Oh my gosh, we have to get through this lesson. This is so important because it re-energizes a student. It regurgitates what they learned, and they learn from each other. Oh, he did it that way. I could have do that next time. Because you know, people have different ideas and get different creative abilities. Okay, what else is informative assessment good for?
It informs the teacher on what the student has learned and maybe like what steps to take next.
Perfect, exactly. That's informative assessment is ongoing assessment that you use to monitor students' progress in learning as well as your teaching. So it can help you with your next steps as well. Who needs what? Gee, that method that I just taught them, what I just didn't work for a lot of students. So I need to rethink how I'm going to introduce that concept. And then I'm going to bring a small group in. You know, so those are perfect. Those are great. So with your activities, so how are the students going to demonstrate the achievement of the learning goals? So how did this, excuse me, so what do we have going in this lesson? How are the students going to demonstrate it? By doing what?
They're illustrating using the storyboard and writing sentences, whether be it census frames or if independent.
Good, Jackie. Okay.
Sue?
Yes.
I have a quick question. Would this be considered too advanced for students, having them match this plot point in like Cinderella and the Rough Face Girl?
Explain it a little bit more to me.
Like, because both stories kind of follow the same path and the same moral.
Mm-hmm.
Having them like compare and contrast the stories, maybe in like a Venn diagram almost.
Well, that's the ultimate to this standard. Okay. Because in the standard is, if we go back up, see, try not to get you dizzy. Compare and contrast two or more versions of the same story. Cinderella, for example, by different authors or from different cultures. So that's your end goal. So with this, you might, with Rough Face Girl, you've just introduced the story and you've identified the elements of the story. Okay, so what could be your next step?
I would probably say having them like realize and like explain to them like, oh, these are like similar morals. These things kind of go together, but they're from different cultures.
Right. So you could, yeah. So you could even have some other ideas on how to compare. You'd want to compare the main characters, the problem, the solution, and the lesson learned. So you would want to think of creative ways of doing that besides just writing. Okay. So you could even do like a comparison chart, Venn diagram is good. That's good. So that might be a follow-up lesson, you know, just depending on how much you want to delve into it. But you would need that follow-up lesson for the compare and contrast. So be thinking about how you'd want to do that. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so they're gonna demonstrate through the storyboard with the guided practice, and then the independent practice is where we're really looking at the storyboard there, looking at the illustrations. By looking at illustrations, that will give you a really good indication if they know who main character is or the characters are, the problem and the solution, just by looking at their pictures, and then by their sentences as well. And how are you going to find out? Okay, so one of the standards says explain the lesson. So you've seen it in an illustration, you've seen it in a sentence form, and you could also do it orally. as well. And you would take, that would be informal, just going around and asking them or having them explain to you in their own words what the moral of this lesson of the story or the lesson of the story. Okay. And you can keep track by that. We do a lot of anecdotal notes. And so, you know, I would just, if that was something I really wanted to focus on, is that oral communication part, I would just have like the list of the names of the students in little boxes. I could even use a list of the students with a title. Let's see, where's my, you know, just like how I keep track of attendance, or how keeping track of your the assignments that we have. Okay. So you can have that. So we call that anecdotal notes, or use post-its and that kind of thing. This person got it. And if that was one of a big learning goal for your classroom. Okay, then here's the other thing though. How will you know they understand the content? How would you always ask this question? Okay, so we know what they're going to demonstrate. So how would we know they understand it? What would you use? What would you say in this or write? This, I would know they understand the content by.
Well, you would be evaluating the storyboards and the sentences that they created.
Good. Okay. By the evaluation of the completion and attention to detail, or whatever you're looking for. Correct. So be thinking of those things. How are you going to determine? Sometimes you'll get into rubrics, and so you'll have a rubric. You'll use a rubric, the student rubric, and determine after looking at their work. Okay. All right. Does that help? Okay. Any other questions? How do you feel? Give me a 1 or a 2. 1 if you're feeling only okay. 2 if you feel like you can go ahead and write up the lesson plan. Good, good, good.
I'm like a 1.5.
Okay, maybe you'll be a 2 point once you get started.
Yeah.
This was very helpful, so thank you, Sue.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was great working with you. I like small groups myself. Much better. Okay. Okay, everybody, take care.
Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Text me or email me if you have any other questions.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye-bye.
Stu, quick question. Will you be having this video in case we need to refer to it again for future reference?
Yes, I'm going to send it out to you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So I have a quick question.
Yes.
For the, what was it?
Wait, just let me get this. I'll do on the lesson plan.
Yes.
Okay, I'll leave it up there then.
Yeah, there it is. You actually have it there. For what activities will students be doing to demonstrate achievement of the learning goals? Could the teacher, I don't know if I'm trying to get it, because she just like read a couple sentences and say, okay, I want you guys to help me identify the characters, and then she would read like a sentence and say, you know, Johnny and Frank went, you know, da 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 da. Can you tell me who the characters were? And then the students say, oh, to the park. And somebody find where the setting is. Oh, the park. Is that kind of also informative assessment?
Totally.
Okay.
Because that shows that they understand the concept of characters and setting.
Setting.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah, so
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
I have a quick question too, but it's about seminar. For the resources list, the assignment isn't on Canvas anymore.
It isn't?
No.
Okay. Huh, that's odd. I'll go back and I'll take a look and put it back up. It was last night, so Okay, I'll take a look and I'll put it back up. I don't know what happened. Maybe it just closed itself out.
I don't know.
I don't know either. Okay, so I'll as soon as the video is processed, I'll go in there and see what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, so it'll probably be within the hour.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.